Welcome to this Grandma's Life podcast. I'm your host, theciaellis. Get ready to laugh, learn, and grow with me as we explore growing old in an ever changing world. One of the good things about growing old is people judge you less when you say something outrageous. I'm getting older, and I've had a fascinating life. I also have opinions. You may not agree with those opinions, and I may not care. Even now, I am passionate about many things. I love to learn. I love quotes. I love my animals on the farm, and I care about my country. Join me as we explore loving life even as we age. Today is July 7, 2024. This is episode 60, Giving Our Country Away. And this one might be a controversial one. But first of all, let's start with farm happenings. We are officially on a break from softball right now. The spring league is over, and the girls are out for summer. They were having I don't know what they called it, where they do work on specific things like batting or something like that. So they weren't having scrimmages, they weren't having any games or anything like that. They were just working on some skills. And then there's just like this week and a half, 2 week period that the kids are not allowed to have anything to do with any of the coaches, which I think is good because the coaches, they work year round at this school. I don't know how it is in other schools, but this particular one, they've got camps and training and all that other stuff all summer long, even over Christmas holidays. Just there's always a way to get into either to the gym or out on the field or whatever they need to do. But there is like a 2 week period that they're not allowed to do that. And that is in today is the last day of that. So there has been a break. And next month, I don't know if we're going to have any scrimmages this month, but next month in August, softball season begins at the school. I've ordered 30. I did order 30 broiler chicks. I think they're about a month old now. So they're about halfway to being ready to go to the processor. I do mine for 8 weeks. I don't know if it's, I give them pretty much free chance to eat, and they do okay. But every once in a while, I get a batch of birds that no matter what, they just don't grow very big. I get the feeling this batch is going to be pretty decent though. But golly, it's been a mess with them. Um, Ordered 30, got 30. Well, I got 29 that were alive, and then I think I lost one or two more along the way. And then we've had a couple of storms, and that's been kind of a challenge because and we're talking about 4 inches of rain, sideways rain. And I had them out in my chicken tractor, which I love these chicken tractors. They have a roof over them, they have plenty of ventilation and stuff. But when you got sideways rain and the rain happened to be coming in on the open end of it, I went out there after one storm, and all of the chicks were near death. They were like laying there, cold, shivering, eyes closed. So I gathered them all up, brought them in, and put them under the heat lamp. And every one of them revived, and I was grateful for that. So I was able to get them back out. And then just a few days later, it happened again. And but I think somewhere in that time, a snake got into the chicken tractor and ate seven. I don't know. I say it's a snake. That's the only thing I could think of. What it is a snake. And so seven were missing, and of course I lost the three, so I'm down to 20 chicks. But after the second storm, and another 4 inches of sideways rain, and we went out there and had to gather them up. But this time we lost electricity, and they were set. They were. I think it was about a week later, so they were about a week older. They had more feathers, and even though they were cold and everything, I just brought them in and toweled them off and put them back in the brooder. But they didn't have electricity, so they couldn't. Just kind of left them to their devices, and they all revived again. I really believe this last 20 is going to make it. And I don't know if you can hear that in the background. I got a puppy that for some reason, it's not going to be too much longer. She's growing fast, but she keeps crawling up underneath the bed, and her toenails make a lot of noise on the floor when she does it. But it takes a lot of work for her to get up underneath the bed, and it takes a lot of work for her to get back out. All right, I got a new rabbit buck. That was a pretty sweet deal. I had because I don't know, my other one escaped, but I got a new rabbit buck, and he's a real pretty white. I think he's a New Zealand one, and I like him. And he's doing real good. And I got a really sweet deal on that. I was able to trade two of my Pekin drakes for this rabbit buck, and that was really nice for me. It's been very, very hot. Now today was been really nice, but that we had a really bad stretch of bad hot weather, like we're talking about 97 degrees actual temperature and heat index of up to 125. So I have some old ceramic tiles that I've been keeping in the freezer. And usually about noon on the really hot days, I've been going out there and sticking these tiles into the with the rabbits, and then at 4 o'clock I switch them out, and I think that's helping. They seem to like the tiles anyway, so that's working out pretty good. Um, like I mentioned, Elsie, she's our new puppy. I This is a sweet puppy. She is an Anatolian Shepherd, Great Pyrenees Anatolian Shepherd mix with a few other little things in there too. But she looks like a puppy Candy. You know, Candy I've had several years, and so she's got the shorter hair, long, sleeker body, not like Beethoven at all, but she's very sweet, pretty good. She, every once in a while, I mean, she's a puppy. I think she's 3 months old, so she chews on things a little bit, and so that's a. But you know, what do you expect? But other than that, if you say no, she doesn't do it. I've been really pleased with her. We did have a peach harvest, and so that was really cool. I got actually we even put a video out on that, and the Tom harvested the garlic and the onions out of our garden, and tomatoes are coming on. We've actually had enough tomatoes that we canned. I think we canned 13 pints of diced tomatoes a couple weeks ago, and then last week I cooked down a bunch of sauce and had 3 1/4 quarts of tomato sauce, and we've got more tomatoes coming on, so I'll be canning again pretty soon. This last week was the week of snakes. The 2 Sundays ago, Tom and I were sitting in our living room, and something caught my eye, and we were watching television, and looked down there, and going across my living room and then down my hall was a 6 foot black snake. And you know, I don't mind black snakes, but not in my house. And so I ran to the barn to go get the snake wrangler so we could at least get it out of the house. But by the time I got back from the barn, I guess it had gone into the pantry room, and Tom didn't know where it had gone. And so, like for days, we're sitting there going, "Man, we don't afraid to even go into the pantry room and to." Regardless, we don't know where the black snake went. And I'm not smelling him, and my dogs are not acting odd in the pantry room. So I think he has moved on and is no longer in the house. But I have a suspicion of where I have a suspicion of a couple of places where he could be getting in. We're in a house that we paid $2,500 for. So yeah, you get what you paid for. But I need to plug a few holes just to make that. And then the other day, on one of those hot days, I have moved the rabbits up underneath an oak tree, and so they get pretty good shade throughout most of the day, but there are times I still need to put the partitions up that I have for my rabbits for shade for them along, and at the same time I move the partitions around, make sure there's shade for the rabbits at the same time as I'm putting the ceramic tiles out. And I had moved one of the partitions, and I'm feeding the rabbits, and no, I wasn't feeding them at that time. I was just moving them around and switching out the tiles and that kind of thing, and was all in it. And I looked down, not 3 inches from my right foot, where I've been stepping and working and doing stuff, was a copperhead. And I don't know why it didn't bite me, but I was really grateful that it didn't. And it was kind of funny because I had to catch my breath, and Kinsey happened to be home, and I told her, I said, "Man, I'm thirsty, my mouth is dry. I don't know why this copperhead didn't bite me." I said, "Well, but if I ever get bit by something, I read that, like, the Native Americans, they used to, when they were bit by venomous snakes, they would lay down and try very hard to keep their heart rate low, and be very calm, and just lay there for 2 or 3 hours to slow the travel of the poison." So I had mentioned that to Kenzie, and Kenzie goes, "If you get bit, you can come inside and tell me that you've been bit, and get in my car, in the back seat of my car, and you can remain calm in the back seat of my car when I'm taking you to the hospital." And I said, "Okay, that'll work." But I didn't get bit. But what was kind of interesting about that, obviously, it was out in the heat of the day, and I was a little apprehensive going over there in the evening chores. And Tom, after he gets home from work, helps me with the evening chores. And sure enough, went over there. And I don't think that snake had moved, if any, an inch. And so I went back to Tom and said, "Hey, that snake's still there, but I think he's dead." And Tom's going, "No, he's not dead. It's just been too hot and he's not been moving." So we got the snake wrangler, and sure enough, that thing was still alive. That was kind of crazy. So we caught it, and yes, we killed it, because I don't want to get bit by a copperhead. So that's my snake story for all in one week. And I've had enough of that for a while. We have a neighbor. He has a huge garden. Like each row is 100 foot long. He does okra and he does corn, and I think he's got some tomatoes. He does some green beans, like 100 feet of green beans and stuff. And so he just harvested a whole bunch of corn, and they shucked it, a bunch of it, and put it in the freezer. Gave us some corn, and also gave us all the corn husks. And so we came by it back with bags and bags of corn husk and fed those to the pigs. Only fed them once a day, but I gave them a lot, and that actually saved me probably 1 or 2 bags of feed for the pigs, and that was really great. And I think he's got a bunch of cucumbers that I can bring home now that have gotten too big that he hasn't picked. And so maybe I go get some cucumbers. But in this batch had a bunch of cucumbers with it too. So the pigs have been happy with that stuff. I did put some new lights up in the kitchen. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. These are those, I don't know, Barina lights. A lot of people use them, a variety of them for starting their plants in the springtime and stuff. And but I'm they also make them where you can just make them under the counter or whatever. So I had bought a batch to go in the barn, some big long lights. I think they're like 3 foot long, but I needed something shorter for the kid. Well, actually, over the sink, I've got the one of the long lights, and then over there, one above the stove and one above the coffee maker. I got two shorter ones. I think they're like 2 foot long or something like that. We got those installed. Oh my gosh, it's so cool to be able to see what you're doing in the kitchen. And it's working out too because the kitchen was so dark, and you kind of adjust to darkness on sometimes, but I'm also videoing in there. I'm going to start showing some canning videos. I've been doing the cooking from the pantry series, and it's just a dark, you know, room, and it's not good for videoing in. So these lights, as bright as they are, I don't care. I can see, and it's nice to be able to video and you actually see what it is that I'm doing. It's neat. I like it. I hope every one of you guys had a wonderful Independence Day celebration. We did. We actually, well, Tom and I got kind of getting too old to party as hard as we did. On the 4th, a friend of mine invited us over, and they had smoked a bunch of meat. Oh my gosh, it was so good. And we all brought sides, and we sat around and chatted with each other. And I didn't even know half the people there, and I didn't care. And neither did Tom. Tom did a really good job. He was talking to people he didn't know. And then we watched their adult children set off a bunch of fireworks, and that was just so nice to sit and talk with them. And then on the 5th, on the Friday night, Tom's got a cousin that they always have a big get together, and like the whole family with their friends and everybody. We show up there. There's probably 50, 60 people there, something like that, maybe more. I don't know, a bunch. And they always go over the top with fireworks. But I tell you what, this year, they had no, and then their boys are getting older. In fact, 2 of them have, I guess even the youngest one is now graduated from high school. And so we're talking about 15 through to 24 age boys. They set up a fantastic thing. They set up a flatbed trailer, and I don't know how they knew how to set up the sequence of all these things, but they bought these fireworks and made a beauty. I mean, it was almost like 15 to 20 minutes of finale type um, fireworks. So it was really nice. And of course, it was a lot of Tom's family there. And it's good to visit with them, you know. And so that was but that was the second night of being out late enough after, you know, because even if I wasn't getting older, when you're a homesteader, you go to bed a little bit early, or at least be home a little bit early, because I do stay up and make sure that I'm up whenever Kinsey comes home from work or for whatever she's doing. So I may not get to bed, actual sleep until 11 o'clock at night, but I am home and settled by 8:30 or 9, you know. And so here we are out there doing fireworks and stuff. So I was tired, but that was okay too. Oh, and then last night, Tom's birthday is tomorrow. So Tom and Kinsey and I went out to eat dinner with my youngest son, his wife, and their 2 year old. And that 2 year old, she's darling. You know, you always talk about terrible twos. I don't think there's anything terrible about that 2 year old. She's as sweet as she can be too. And so we had a wonderful meal last night, and that was good. And I just got home. They're doing a fundraiser for kids camp at no youth camp at church, and so we were doing um, everybody made dessert and bring it. We had an auction, and I think they raised over $800 to help out with the expenses of youth camp, and that was fun. So I just got home from that. That's our Independence celebration. Oh, and tomorrow we're taking Tom is taking the day off from work, not because it's his birthday, but because I made an appointment with the processor, and Yoda, my pig, is going to the processor tomorrow. Okay, what I'm listening to on audiobooks, I'm on the second round of God Emperor Doom by Frank Herbert, and it was written in 1981. And I'm on the first listing of Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. I believe that's how you pronounce it. It was written in 2017. Then that's been a pretty good book. And in fact, I'm gonna go through it again and see if it's not gonna be worth me actually having a hard copy of that. So I'm looking forward to that. And that was my alarm telling me it's quitting time. What I'm actually reading, I'm still working on The Grow System by Marjorie Wildcraft. That was written in 2021. And it's part of a some stuff that I'm researching for a different podcast is well on this Grandma's Life podcast, but I'm researching and I'm reading Johnny Erickson Tada, her book, When Is It Right to Die? It was written in 1992. And I don't know if you know anything about her. She's about my age, maybe a little older than me, but when she was young, she jumped into some water and didn't know that it was shallow and broke her neck, and she's paralyzed from I think like the shoulders down, something like that. And but she's lived a wonderful, nice, good life. I mean, what do you do? And the only thing you can move your head, but she's actually married to a wonderful man, and I think they've had children and stuff too. So she has a good story. And whenever I'm considering a bunch of things right now, I was wondering, when is it right to die? So I've been reading that book. That's one of the things I'm doing for research. And then for my fiction book, it says it's a Robert Lundlum book, but Robert Lundlum didn't write it. It was written by Joshua Hood. It's called The Treadstone Insurrection. It was written in 2019. It's one of those oh, military. You're supposed to know what all the military weapons are, and everybody's a badass and can kick butt and get run over by a truck, get back up and go beat the bad guy. So that's the book I'm reading now, called The Treadstone Insurrection. Okay, now we're going to go into our main subject, and it's 17 minutes in. But our main subject is giving our country away. And I have felt this way for a very long time. And I'm going to kind of lay out why I feel this way. And when I say a long time, I'm talking about late 1980s is when I have felt like we've been giving our country away. My heart hurts every time I hear of another death, a rape, or an attack on the women and girls of our country by these immigrants who are in our country illegally. Despite what the media wants you to believe, way too many of these people are crossing our border illegally, or no, way too many people are not upstanding citizens. I wrote it wrong, but they're not good people. I mean, there are some good people that are trying to come over the border, that they're trying to make a life for themselves, but I would say probably 90% of the people are not coming over for that. And that's what we're looking at now. When I lived in California, I lived in Southern California in the late 80s and early 90s. The apartment complex that we lived in was 6 miles from the Mexican border. And at night in our apartment complex, we could actually hear them running past our bedroom window at night. Apparently, there was a coyote that stayed over there at the bar around the corner from us, and they would run past our windows to that bar and to meet up with their coyote and get put in further inland. And there's drug when we moved to El Cajon, which was inland of San Diego. My youngest son had to step over all kinds of drug users, and a lot of them were Mexican and a lot of them were not, but they actually had to step over these men with needles and stuff just so he could even get to the school. When you now, I understand part of this is because it was a military area. There's we were inland from a major naval base, a major naval Air Force base, and a little bit further north was is a Marine base. And so there's a lot of military there. So but it was kind of interesting because you could our apartment complex was a square place with a courtyard in the middle of it, and you can stand there because the temperature stayed pretty moderate. You didn't have to run the air conditioner very often. Everything, even inland. I mean, it could get hot inland, but you just didn't need an air conditioner most of the time. And you could hear Tagalog, Spanish, Farsi, Arabic. I can't remember all the different languages you could hear while you were standing there. And there's this time you just wish you go, hey, we're America, guys. Let's speak some English. Let me think. I did have in El Cajon, we had the second highest population of Iraqi citizens than next to Detroit, Michigan at the time. So we had a lot of Iraqi. And while we were living in El Cajon, that's when Desert Storm broke out. So that was kind of an interesting issue to get into. In fact, when war was declared, you could actually hear everybody had their front doors open with CNN and all that other stuff, all blaring, trying to keep up with which of their family was going to get blown apart and stuff. So, that was kind of an interesting thing too. But there was one Iraqi man he was not a nice guy. And I found out later that he had already been deported like 6 times and come back. But I didn't know that at the time. I just know that one time he was chasing his young wife through the courtyard and was going to beat her up. And I, being an idiot, stepped in front of him and I'm going, you are in my courtyard and you will act accordingly. Well, he started coming after me. And I was very grateful when about 6 different men come running out of out of their apartments and steered him away from me. I'm going, thanks, guys. I'm going inside. And that's when I found out later that he's Iraqi and he comes into the across the board. And this was back in the early 90s. This was early 90s when this was happening. We had a lot of people that were going back over the southern border back even in the 80s and 90s. And that were not necessarily Mexican, but there were plenty of Mexicans too. And you could take the driver's license, I believe it was in 8 different languages. And David's school, my oldest son, Kenzie's father, he was going to school at the time. Tony was still way too young because he was born while we were living there. But poor David, they had what they called year-round school. And you went to school for 3 months and then you were out for 3 months. And they had it where that month that you were out, a different track would take over the classroom that you were in. So you could put 100% of the kids in school in 75% of the classrooms. But David got stuck on the Hispanic speaking track and we were not able to transfer him to the thing. It was kind of weird too. So he was off in October and February and June, I believe. Those were the 3 months he was out, but it was bad because his neighbors were on different tracks. And so when he was off out of school, he was on a different track for them. And, he's going, well, it's June. I want to be playing with some of my friends when they were in school, so it was I didn't like that setup at all. But because David was set on the Hispanic track, this was a track that it was taught in Spanish by Hispanic teachers. And David, being the white boy, was stuck in the corner and not taught. He was just given busy work. I didn't think that was real cool either. And you know what? I don't care what your opinion is on this. This is all fact. This is all the stuff that's happened. And so just giving you information that's happened to me in our lives when we were in the California. The Denny's up the road, I can't remember what their nationality was. I believe they were Iraqi. There was an Iraqi owned Denny's. And the only people that would go in there were Iraqis. We made that mistake. They weren't mean to us or anything like that, but nobody spoke English. And these men would sit in different tables all over one man was sitting in one corner, another man was sitting in another corner, and another man was sitting in the corner, and someone was sitting in the middle, and they all spoke in very loud voices in their own language. And I don't know, I wasn't comfortable there. I didn't feel like I was in my own country while I was there. And then one of the most poignant things that I had seen, and you can look them up, is all over the roads, especially on I-5 and 805 and all them, these signs that shows like they're the silhouettes of people, like, and it shows a man and a woman. Obviously, you're supposed to think it's a woman because it's dressed, because that used to be what it meant back in the day. And then they were dragging a little girl. Now, little girl, it appeared by the silhouette that the little girl her feet were not even touching the ground. But basically, this was a sign, an international sign, that there were pedestrians with children, and they're going to run in front of you on the highway, and be careful of it. I just hated that sign. I hated what it stood for, and I hated the fact that we had to have it, that we had to watch for families dragging their children across the road as they're sneaking into my country. So yeah, that was one of those things. I had seen my first high-speed chase when we were living in Southern California, down there about 6 miles from the border. There was I think it was a Chevy Impala, and it was full of Mexicans, and it was being chased down by I don't know, 5 or 6 ICE people. They were called Border Patrol back in those days. Um, the the borders, even then, for Tijuana for certain, they had the wall. Okay, so you guys want a wall? Let me tell you what. Let me show you what the wall does. It's a real good place for the people to sit every night. As evening gathers, so do the Mexicans. And on the Mexico side, there are vendors all up and down the place. They're selling tacos, they're selling all kinds of street foods and stuff like that. And the closer it gets to dark, the more these guys are climbing up on the wall, and they're watching the Border Patrol on the other side. The Border Patrol is down on the American side, and they had to put cages over their windshields and their headlights and all that other stuff, because what they do is the Mexicans would sit up on top of the wall, and they would wait and find when it was a good time, and somebody would throw a rock or throw a whole bunch of rocks at one particular Border Patrol and distract him. While they're throwing rocks and squaring off with him, about 30 people down the wall are running into our country. This was in late 80s, early 90s, and they were coming over by the thousands at that time, and I couldn't even tell you how many. When we would my husband of the time spoke Spanish, and when we would go into Mexico, which we liked going into Mexico, and I'll tell you about that here in a few minutes too. It was sad because while you're waiting to be inspected to come back into the United States, there's these women carrying babies, and they're actually sitting down by the exhaust pipes with these babies, trying to beg for food or beg for money and stuff. And it was just a really sad situation. When we traveled to South Texas, we Tom's mother lived literally on the river. What was that? Rio Grande River, over there by McAllen in Texas. And actually, she was on the other side of the levee wall. So even though she was in the United States, the levee was basically kind of the border that she was in. And of course, they had, and she was on the river. Literally, you could walk just a few feet and you'd be to the Rio Grande River, and you could see the Mexicans crossing their water there. And so they actually had one of those stands where the Border Patrol can get up there and look for illegal crossings, even just in her apartment, in her trailer park that she lived in. And so, but then when we were vacationing down there, when you go to vacation and stuff down there, the closer you get to the border, the more surly they get. In the United States, they expect you know how to speak Spanish, and they don't care that they're in your country. They expect you to speak Spanish, and if you do not, they do not. If they're working in a grocery store, they won't wait on you. If they're working on something, that type of work, restaurant, whatever, if you don't speak Spanish, they won't wait on you, and they're just surly and not very nice. Um, I was a manager of a jewelry store in Temple, Texas, way, way back in the 80s. And this was early to mid 80s, or mid 80s, basically. And I was wanting to get a job at Corpus Christi in the 80s, and I was not allowed to have that job. I was a manager of a jewelry store, and I was going for a regional manager, and I could not get the job because I didn't speak Spanish. I'm thinking, what? We're in the United States. This is America. When are we going to figure out that this is America? Well, we never did figure it out. We're having to learn to speak all these languages. Well, and that's one of the things too. One of the ladies that what Tom's family, she was with a nurse down there. She's retired years ago, but she showed up to work one day, and she was getting her instructions for the day, and the nurse from the previous shift was speaking to her in Spanish, and this woman goes, I speak English. So she goes, we better learn Spanish because we're here. And she refused to give the instructions to this nurse that was American in America, the instructions for the next shift because she didn't speak Spanish. So yeah, I have a little bit of attitude with some of this. I try not to, but I really do. There's a lot of stories I could tell, and I'll quit with there. But like I said, we used to go into Mexico. My husband did speak Spanish, and we would go in, and the people that we visit down there were wonderful. Oh my gosh, they were always very accommodating. They would feed you till you couldn't move, and show you the different things that they had. One guy was doing all kinds of cool. Um, oh shoot, what's the word? Things that he was inventing. And so he was showing us that stuff, a new way for a couch to fold out into the bed, and all that other stuff. And then we were in Tecate, Mexico. And I don't know if people know this. I want you to know, if you drink Tecate beer, you will need to understand. And this was I think it was in the early 90s. And it may have changed since then. But when we were in Tecate, Mexico, these guys all had cisterns, barrels, containers, all the stuff, because everybody in Tecate only got 1 hour of water at their home in a 24-hour period. But you were never allowed to know. You never knew what 1 hour it was. You didn't know when the water was going to be turned on. So somebody always had to be home or ready to fill up all the containers, to fill up the cisterns, to fill up the teapots, to fill up the tubs, to fill up everything to last them for the next 24 hours, because they all rationed their water so they can make Tecate beer. And that's what kept that town alive, was the Tecate beer. We liked going into Ensenada. Ensenada is south of Tijuana. Tijuana is right on the border, and it is definitely a border town. It's rough. It's a lot of beggars and all that other stuff. But if you go a little further south, I think about an hour, it's Ensenada. The drive down to Ensenada is just gorgeous. It's right along the coast. And there down in Ensenada, there's an open air fish market, and that was when I had my first fish tacos. And I guarantee you, those fish tacos were good. And so, but what's the difference? Well, the good people who lived in Mexico like it there. And those crossing the border, they know they're breaking the law, and they don't care. Are they desperate? Most are not. Most are not. No, no, no joke. There was one man. There was one. Well, my ex-husband's family were into catering, and we would help with the catering business on occasion. And one of the guys there, Alvarado, he had family in Mexico, and I don't know how far bounced down south into Mexico it was. Apparently, it was nowhere near the border. He would go. He would come across illegally and come work for the Cortuchos and stay for several months and earn good money. And then you get up the next one morning and he wouldn't be there. He'd gone back to Mexico, and he would stay there for a few weeks. And then when the money ran out, he'd come back up and work again. And they always hired him back because he was a good worker and did a good job. But you just never knew how long he was going to be there. Now, one time he stayed for a long time, and I don't know where he lived. Like I said, I get the feeling it was very rural. He lost a child down because I think she was like 2 years old, and she was playing in a rut in the road, and a car came through and landed in the rut and killed his little girl. So he disappeared for quite a while at that time too. Was he desperate? No. He was taking advantage of being able to come over here into our country and make decent money, and then taking it back to his country. And that happened a lot. When it gets close to Christmas time, you can see pickups loaded literally 20 feet high with bicycles or whatever else they could find, so they could take it back to their country and sell it. And so a lot of money. When we were doing apartment complexes, we would have to check the walls, because they would cut holes in the walls and they would hide the money in the walls. And then when they moved out, they took their money with them and they left the hole in the wall. So even when these people were coming into our country, a lot of them, especially when you live that that close to the border, the money was not staying in the United States. It was going into Mexico. The masses of people that are coming now have an agenda. They know our borders are weak and open, and they are taking advantage of it. They know that they are breaking the law. Many of these people that are coming in now were in prison. They're clearing out their prisons in these other countries to send them here. And many of these guys are gang members, terrorists, rapists, murderers, etc. And this one's a rough part because the ICE people know this is going on too. The Border Patrol. Unaccompanied children are coming to the border, coming in and checking in, and they have phone numbers on their pinned to their clothes. And these are supposed to be for host families that are supposed to come pick them up. And I don't know what the percentage is. I think somebody has stated that 80% of these kids that are showing up at our border with a phone number attached to their clothing are not host families. They are human traffickers. And ICE knows this. They know when these kids are showing up on our border that the chances are very high that that child that they just checked in at the border is going to be sold for sex. And they know it. And that's wrong. And we won't even talk about the fentanyl and all the other drugs that are coming over in this country too. So yeah, they still have the women that are coming over that are very pregnant. They actually try to make it because one of the things that you have to be here and stay if you have a medical emergency. So they wait. These women are waiting until they are in labor before they try to cross the border, and then they get in here. So they can have their child in our country and have that citizenship rooted there with their child. So now that I've told you all these stories, and I listen to the news, I've listened to the news for years and years and years. Build the wall, close the border, and I put a lot of thought into it. And maybe we still do need a wall, and we certainly do need to make sure that we got things checking going in and out. But I feel in my heart that if we cut off the funding, because even now, all these people, if you look at the people that have been crossing the border that by the thousands, many of them are clean. And I found out it's because well-meaning Christian organizations are feeding and clothing these people that are coming into our country so they can come here and take everything else too. Let's cut off the funding. Let's not let them have their babies in our country. Let's not give them Social Security. Let's not give them phones. Let's not give them anything, and certainly no voting rights. And I feel that if we cut off the funding and quit taking care of all these people coming into the country, they won't come anymore. They will deport themselves. They'll go somewhere else. It may take a little time. It may, but we can't do this as a country. This is our country, And I'm not saying don't come legally though. Do your part and then assimilate. Become an American citizen. Fly the American flag, not your flag that you came from. I want to know if you're going to come into my country that you're going to have allegiance to my country and not to yours. That to me, that's a Trojan horse thing. Oh, you're going to come into my country and fly your flag and tell me that I have to learn your language and I have to follow what you do in my country? I don't think so. So that's how I feel about that. I'm not prejudiced in general unless somebody's in my country breaking my laws and my country's laws and expecting me to bend to their ways instead of making the effort to learn my country's ways. And certainly if they're going to fly their home country's flag instead of Old Glory. I do not look at any person and pass judgment on them like, oh, they're Mexican, they must be illegal, or oh, they're Middle Eastern, whatever. I don't do that. I try to treat everyone with respect. Therefore, I anticipate the respect returned to me, especially in my own country. So my question of the day is, this is my take on the illegal immigration situation. What's your stance? Give me an email at theciaellis@gmail.com. theciaellis@gmail.com. And let me know what your feelings are on this. All right. Let's not forget about the Self-Reliance Festival this year. This fall is October 5 and 6, and there are always more things. I seem like on the 4th they're going to have things, and for sure on Friday they start gearing up and doing things. But October 5th and 6th is a Saturday and Sunday. Guys, I've been several times. It is well worth your time and money. There are so many different, talking about diversity. There are all kinds of people there, but they all see eye to eye on one thing. They want to be self-reliant. So if you want to go to that and check it out, go on the website just to see what's available and check out some of the speakers and stuff. But go through my link below. And if you end up getting a ticket, I would certainly appreciate it. It won't cost you any more if you go through that link to get it, and it would help me out a lot. All right, where I can be found. Oh, lately I've been doing a bunch of stuff on TikTok. Is Thecia Ellis. Oh, every day I do 6 or 7 days a week. I do a scripture and a quote, and I post it on TikTok. Now that I've got a puppy, I post stuff about the puppy because she does some funny things. When the piglets, when they were young, I was posting things on them. So TikTok at Thecia Ellis, and but my website is grandmashomestead.farm. My main YouTube channel is Grandma's Homestead. I have a farm animal life, Kinsey Lackey Sports. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, MeWe, Thecia Ellis, Twitter, and Rumble, and under some version of Thecia Ellis or Thecia E. All right, guys, that's all I got for you. I know this was kind of a rough one and maybe even a little bit controversial for a bunch of you guys, but you know what? I love my country, and I have felt for 40 years now that we've been giving it away, and I'm ready to get it back. All right, guys, God bless. I'll see you next time.